Welcome to the Pockets of Knowledge podcast. I'm your host, Desiree Stanley, here to share some amazing conversations. We're talking business, health, making and saving money, or starting something epic. Think of this as your go-to spot for stories that do a lot more than just kill time. They spark ideas, give you a boost, and perhaps even change the way you look at the world. I'm pulling in the experts, the thinkers, the doers, and the dreamers. We're about to dive into stories that open doors and ideas that light up your brain. Here we go. Welcome, everyone, to the Pockets of Knowledge podcast. I'm your host, Desiree Stanley, and with me today is my guest, Barbori Garnet. How are you today, Barbori?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm just excited to be here.
Wonderful. I am excited for our conversation today. And you are an author, a writer, and a journaling enthusiast. And we are absolutely going to dive into all of that. You've published a couple of books and you're going to be sharing about that, but really more in detail about journaling. Take it away, Barbori. Tell us how this came to be. Like, what inspired you to begin journaling and author books on journaling?
For sure. No, it's a great questions. And I just look forward to sharing today. And I started journaling many years ago. And it was in my 20s that I really began to use journaling more specifically for me as well to grow in my career and to write down my goals. That way I could keep track on them and just see if I was making progress on them, as well as be able to check in and every few months and just see where I was at and if I wasn't making progress, why I wasn't, and then be able to adjust from there accordingly. And the more that I learned about journaling and journal myself, the more I realized that I wanted to share my knowledge with others and also share not just the knowledge about journaling, but also different types of journals that one can keep. And that's what led to my writing the book on journaling.
So, were you always set out to be a writer, or was this something that developed later on? Tell us a little bit about that.
For sure. I always enjoyed writing, but it definitely took a few years for me to develop my skills in writing. And that was the process of over many years from my teens and all the way, even now, I'm still learning where I can to improve my writing. And that's just great to be able to increase my skills and knowledge in the area of writing too. But it is something that I have enjoyed for a long time. And I have previously written more like short stories and some fiction. In the last, I would say, 5 years or so, I have focused more on nonfiction. And it's in the last 3 years as well that I published my two books. So when I started focusing more on nonfiction is also when I started focusing more as well on creating books and writing books, not nonfiction books.
So, was this something that you studied in college, or you learned to write to actually publish later on?
A combination. My graduate degree is in communications, I majored in public relations. So I did hone my writing skills in my graduate degree. So that was really good to just write lots of essays and just learn a lot about branding and messaging and marketing. And that all does relate and has helped in the marketing of books. And so that's the education side of it. And then after that, I just continued to write on my own and just learn more skills and more about different topics. And then the marketing side has been a little bit of trial and error to see what works, what doesn't. And that's also been fun in its own way too, and something that I enjoy as well. So it's been a really good combination of education and also learning as I go.
Yeah, great point there, too. Sometimes we think we need to know everything before we start. And a lot of times we're just learning as we go. It is trial and error, and you're figuring things out like what works, what doesn't work, and try something different another day. And I think that's a great reminder for people who are maybe considering starting something new. You don't need to
Exactly.
know all the answers, how to do everything right from the beginning. But it tends to stop a lot of us from trying because we just don't know how, we don't know what we're supposed to do or whatever. And we don't necessarily need to know all that before we dive in, right?
Exactly. That's well said. I can say better for myself.
Well, so let's talk about why specifically you began writing and journaling. Was there something that happened in particular that was like the inspiration for beginning to journal, or was it just really, I want to just keep some ideas down?
I think originally it was more that I just wanted to keep ideas down, especially more when I was younger. And then over the last 10 years, it's even been more important for me to keep those ideas down because I find, at least personally, that I do go back to previous journals and I look at the goals that I've set because sometimes I didn't accomplish them during the time that I was journaling or writing in that particular notebook. But maybe 3 or 5 years after that, I accomplished the goal. And so it's neat to go back and be able to say, oh, I wrote it down, I don't know, 5 years ago, and now it's something that I've accomplished. And just to see what the steps were to make that happen. Or it's also been great to have the ideas down because sometimes I refer back to them because now is a great time to actually work on them. Whereas 3 or 5 years ago wasn't the right time, but now there's the right circumstances or just the right, yes, right circumstances to act on those ideas. And so that's been really great to then already have the ideas written down and be able to find the journal and say, oh, this is the idea. Okay, now I know how to implement it and be able to take action step 1, 2, and 3. And that's been something that I've really appreciated about journaling more recently. And I would say by more recently in the last 3 to 5 years.
Mhm. Yeah, so this sounds like a great idea if you are trying to run a business, but do you keep separate journals for, say, like personal things and or business things, or do you combine them together? Is it just one flow of whatever happens to come up for you in the day? How does that work for you?
That's a great question. And that's something that I really appreciate about journaling is that it is flexible. To answer that question, I used to have separate journals
Mm.
and notebooks for more the journal about what was going on in my personal life, and then separate notebook for business related ideas. And that worked great. But then in the last, I'd say probably a year or two, I've consolidated and just write down everything in one journal, just because I find that I want to have it in one place and not have to have 2 or 3 different journals and notebooks that I refer to. So for that reason, I've changed my approach and now just keep it all in one journal, and that's been working really good.
Yeah. I could see how there may be pros and cons for either approach, right? Some people
Exactly.
may prefer to keep them separate just because of ideas. But if it's a personal journal, then you may be just talking about the diary, right? So you just do
Hmm.
daily activities or events or things that have been going on versus things, action plans or items you want to accomplish. But again, having it all in one place is kind of cool too, because not only for ease of use, but because then you can look back on both of those things and reflect on where you've gone along the route and things you have accomplished or experienced. And so that's kind of cool too. For myself,
Exactly. Mhm.
I've kept a journal since my teen years as well, and I think I found at one point an old diary from when I was, like, in elementary school, and that was kind of hilarious to look back on and see all the misspellings of words, and everything was spelled by sounding it out, right?
Mhm.
And so just completely misspelled, but it's cute to look back on that and see what was
Yes.
I thinking and doing at that time and what was
Mhm.
important to me versus now as an adult who
That's
has
right.
grown children. So it's for
Mhm.
sure fun. I absolutely love it. And I write in a journal every single day. So I'm a fan.
That's fabulous. That's awesome.
Yeah. So tell us, as an owner of a business, or maybe somebody who is thinking to launch a business,
Mhm.
what way would they be able to find journaling helpful?
Yeah, that's a great question. And there's many ways that someone who either is a business owner or thinking of launching their business can use journaling as a tool to support them. If whether they are launching their business or currently a business owner, some of the ways that journaling can help them is by writing down different business ideas that they have, or it could be steps that they need to do ahead of a product launch. It could be things that they need to do to set up their business, and that can even just under that, for setting up a business, it might just be helpful just to make a list, like a point form list of things need to do like business registration, insurance, look into business taxes, and just the fact that one makes that list and writes it down can make everything seem less overwhelming.
Mm.
Because then it's something that's on the paper and doesn't have to be remembered, like, one isn't overwhelming one's memory. And so then one can always refer back and say, "Okay, what did I write down? What's the next step?" "Oh, yeah, that's right. It was to reach out to an insurance agent, for example, or a broker to find out more information about business insurance." So that can be really helpful. And same thing for a business owner. They might find that they need a different insurance policy, for example. And so they write down research insurance brokers or agents to reach out to or ask other business owners who they recommend. So it's a great way to keep track of different things to do, as well as business ideas, and then also things that business owners or those who would like to be business owners might feel overwhelmed with. And then if they're feeling overwhelmed with the different tasks in their business, then this might be more specifically for a business owner, then they might want to consider, okay, is it time for me to think about hiring someone? What does that look like? And they might just begin by posing the question, is my business, am I ready as a business owner to hire help? If yes, what kind of help? And just by asking those questions, that can already start them thinking about what is the next right step or their next solution. And they just make it more manageable and also feel that they're moving forward as well. So those are just a few of the many ways that journaling is an excellent tool for both current business owners as well as those who are contemplating starting a business.
Yeah, great points in there, Barbary, for sure. And I got the idea of a brain dump, right? Where
That's right.
so often we have like swirling thoughts. It's just like everywhere, and our brain is
Hmm.
racing all across the board. And by just dumping all that information on paper, we can begin to see, what do I need to do first? And
Exactly.
the point about overwhelm, absolutely. By putting it on paper, you begin to see it in a different light, and it reduces that overwhelm, I think. And in my own experience, I've known that for sure. Everything becomes more manageable when I've written it down and it's not
Hmm.
just like racing through my head. So, yeah, great points. And forgetting things too, how easy it is when you're rattling off. It's like the grocery list when you go to the store.
That's
It's,
right.
I've got all these things I need to get, but then
Hmm.
you've forgotten three or four of them by the time you get to the
That's
store. And
true.
so, yeah, writing them down makes such a
Hmm.
difference, right? Yeah, good stuff.
Exactly.
So, what are your maybe some suggestions that you have for somebody who isn't sure how to start journaling? I mean, even for me, I see all these great looking journals, and then
Mhm.
you buy it and you almost don't want to ruin it, because it's like such a beautiful book or whatever you found. And it's, oh, I don't want to even write in that because it's just too pretty. What are your maybe some suggestions on how to even get started?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, a great place to start. And so I'd recommend that one way to start a journal is to write down on the first one or two pages, maybe just some favorite inspirational quotes
Mm.
or verses that can be encouraging for someone who is looking to journal to help them in career and or business development. And after that, once they write down some of their favorite quotes or sayings, then that might help be the sort of the segue into continuing to journal. Another way is to write down, maybe start by writing down their goals at the beginning of the journal and then as well, one usually thinks about journaling is having to write down sentences and paragraphs and such. That's one way. Another way is what's called the bullet journal method. And that is just making bullet points of thoughts. Doesn't even need to be things to do. It can just be thoughts or what one did that day or things that one wants to do in the coming week. So it's very flexible as well. And it can also be done very quickly. So if someone has 2 or 3 minutes in the morning or at the beginning of the week, even to do that, then that's a great way to be efficient and still do some journaling. So that's a great solution for having working with a shorter amount of time.
Mhm.
Other ways is to use different colored pens to get started, maybe a different color pen for the date and the time, and then different color for actually writing down thoughts on the page. So there are many different ways that a journal can be started and personalized as well in that way.
Yeah, definitely. And I love the idea of using different color pens. That is a way to be creative while just doing something simple like this.
Hmm.
And it can be as much as or as little as we have time for or maybe our
That's
level
right.
of creativity
Yeah.
because I not necessarily I can't draw and so many people do such beautiful journals, but it doesn't have to be like that. It can just be something simple, right? But a fun way is alternating colors or something fun like that, and then you can kinda spark it, spruce it up, if you will. And I love the idea of starting with quotes because I think for me, sometimes it's like, where do I even start with
Hmm.
the entry that I'm gonna be making or whatever? And it can be like, well, no, I don't wanna start with that, or no, I don't wanna start with that. And then you're not writing anything. But
True.
at least you're putting pen to paper and getting words
Hmm.
out, even if they're not your own words, but it could then spark that inspiration to what you wanna write next. So
That's right.
cool.
Exactly. Hmm.
Yeah, good stuff. How often would you say let me see how I wanna ask this. If you're going through changes and you're in life or business and you're trying to navigate all of this, how would you suggest or what are your thoughts on how people can use journaling to help them through those times?
So just make sure that I understand the question. The question is how to use journaling when there are many changes
Yeah.
going on? Yeah, for sure. I would recommend one of the best ways to use journaling during a time of many changes is to try to find regular times for journaling.
Mm,
And I'd recommend probably, I'm going to say between 2 to 4 times a week. And I'm just giving a range there that can again be tailored to anyone's schedule and what they have going on, and make it a little bit of a ritual as well. And so, what I mean by that is try to choose a consistent time to journal. And it might be, for example, Sunday evening to prepare for the week ahead. It could be midweek Wednesday morning and then Saturday morning, for example. And then Wednesday morning would be kind of like a midweek to check in, and then Saturday morning would be like a recap of the week, and then Sunday evening would again be getting ready for the following week. That would be one approach. And it can just be helpful to know that one has the journal to go to when everything else is changing, the journal is still there. It stays the same.
mm,
And it's consistent, it's constant, and just be able to even again quickly write down or what is what are the changes and how one feels about those changes. Some of the changes can be good, but one can still feel overwhelmed by them or can be excited. And so in that way, also kind of feeling like they have more energy. So, oh my goodness, this is exciting. So there's like different kinds of changes, and there will be different reactions, thoughts, feelings, and also maybe different opportunities that come with those changes too. And another way that one can approach journaling is to write down how one feels about the change, if one is happy about it or didn't expect it, and to write that down 1 month, and then next month also to follow up and see whether one's perspective on the change has changed because maybe something else, something better has opened up in that time span. And maybe that's actually even a better fit or allows for going in a different direction that is more aligned with one's gifts and skills. So it's important to, I guess, use the journal as a place to have a perspective on the change and just be to have it as a support to navigate through the changes and also be a place where one can evaluate how one feels about the change and again how the thoughts on it change over time, which is really neat to see. And I know that's happened to me as well, that there's been some changes and maybe at first I was wondering or where does it fit in? And then a couple months later, something else opened up, and then I had the time for it, for something new that came along. So then it helped me to shift my perspective on the change, and I was happy that it had come about, even if I didn't think about it at the time in that way.
Yeah, great suggestions, Barbary, for sure. I love the idea of scheduling time, and it maybe doesn't have to be every single day. It could be 3 times a week, like you suggested. And it's a great opportunity to like get into it without
Mhm.
feeling so much pressure about it because you're only doing it spaced out over the week, like you
That's
shared.
right.
And I think
Mhm.
that's a great idea. And I love writing down your thoughts about and feelings about something that maybe has come up that you weren't expecting, and then looking back on it later to see, was this a good thing? And did
Mhm.
something really wonderful happen because of it, or maybe not? And
Mhm.
how do you feel about it? And so I think those are great suggestions. So thank you for sharing those with us.
You're welcome.
What tips do you have maybe for some prompts that the listeners could use to begin journaling?
Yeah, for sure. To relate the prompts to career and business development, one that comes to mind right away is for business owners and those who are looking to use journaling as a tool to help them in their career development is to notice, when do they work best in the day? Is it in the morning, early or late afternoon, in the evening? And just in that way to begin to get to know themselves. So that would be one prompt. I'll just say that one more time here. The prompt is to ask yourself, when do you work best during the day? Another question would be, what work environment do you enjoy most and why? Another would be, what would you like to learn in order to help you grow in your career or develop your career further? The same applies for being a business owner. What would you like to learn more about, or what do you need to learn more about in order to add a new product or expand your business? And expand the business, that can also vary greatly. It could be opening a new location, it could be hiring someone to work in the business, it could be exploring the option of a business partner. So that can also have different answers and solutions, but just starting to ask that question is a great place to start. Another one could be, when do I enjoy most journaling? And then journaling at those times. So it could be mornings, it could be evenings, it could just be once a week on Saturday afternoon, and make that a bit of a date with yourself. Have a cup of tea while you journal, for example, and then just enjoy half an hour of dedicated journaling time for the week. And that way, you know that on Saturday afternoon at 3 o'clock, for example, that's your time to journal. And so those are some of the things to begin with. Others would be, what are the goals for the quarter or the year, and write those down. Others could be, what podcasts, for example, or webinars do I want to listen to or attend? So there's lots of different topics that business owners and others who are looking to develop their career can begin with, and it can also lead to other topics when they begin on those prompts. Starting on one prompt can also mean that, or could lead to other topics that will come up through answering that particular prompt, which is the fun of journaling too, is that when you start writing on one topic, then it might bring to mind something else. And then that's okay. Feel free to go to that topic because that's fresh in your mind and you want to get it out onto the page while the thoughts are there.
Yeah. Yeah, great ideas there for sure. And I want to just touch on the idea of journaling as a little bit of self care and taking
Mhm.
time, carving that out on a day, like you said, have some tea or whatever your favorite beverage is, and go to a space that feels really good and just take some time for you to get all those things out and or down on the piece of paper as a way to clear your mind, but also explore some things that come up for you. And like
Mhm.
you said, one prompt may, as you begin to answer it, it may lead you in a different direction, but that's okay because it's a little bit of like free writing in a way. And
That's
wow,
right.
I didn't know I was thinking about that until it just came out on the
Mhm.
paper. And what you can discover, I think is really cool too. So
Mhm.
great suggestions. And your idea about, as a business owner, when do I work best? This is such important stuff because
Mhm.
we try to cram or shove ourselves into a box maybe that we don't fit or doesn't feel right for us. But when we look at, when do I work best? How do I work best?
Mhm.
We're going to find what's right for us that makes us most productive and feel the best as we're doing it. And so I love those
Mhm.
ideas to get out on paper to really discover some things about yourself too.
Yes. No,
Yeah.
definitely. That's something actually that I did mention or I did write about briefly in my first book, which is called Home at the Office: Working Remotely as a Way of Life. And in there, I do mention about beginning to notice when one works best, is most focused.
Yeah.
And that was actually an idea that I got from another book that I read. I believe it's called Ecopreneur by John
Mm.
Ivanko and Lisa Kivarist.
Okay, fantastic. So I'll make sure to include that information in the show notes for the listeners to check out. And let's dive in now then into your books. You just shared about the working from home. And so many of us are doing that now since the pandemic. And
Exactly.
it's offered us fabulous opportunities, right? Because
Hmm.
we didn't have some of that before as an option, but because of necessity, it has opened up a lot of opportunity for people. And so, why don't you share that book with us now, the title, where listeners can find it, and what they would discover in it?
For sure. My first book was called Home at the Office: Working Remotely as a Way of Life, and that was published in 2021. Very good time with when a lot of us were working from home. And it's on my website, and there are links to different places. It can be bought on Barnes and Noble as well as Indigo, Amazon. So all those places. It's available as both a print book and an ebook. And then my second book, The Gift of Journaling: Writing as a Path to Discovery, was published in April this year. And that one is available in the same places: Barnes and Noble, Indigo, Amazon.com, and .ca. And again, both formats, print book and ebook as well.
Excellent. And so, the gift of journaling is the most recent, and congratulations on that
Thank you.
book as well. So, tell us a little bit more about that. And since our conversation is about journaling, what would the listeners find in there?
Yeah, what reader would find in the book is the different types of journals that one can keep. And I share 15 different types of journals. One of them is a career and business journal. And some other journals, examples of journals, are travel journal, money and finance journal, and they can be kept as separate journals. And we talked a little bit about this earlier today. So they can be kept as separate journals, or it can be combined all in one journal. So whatever works best for as they journal is great. And then there's also resources at the end of the book as well, which includes prompts, A to Z of journaling prompts, and then resources with websites and book recommendations that are more journaling specific or journaling related, as well as a Q&A portion, hands-on at the back of the book, where readers are able to take some time to answer questions such as when they might like to journal, what are their goals for journaling, what they like to learn about journaling, and different things like that.
That sounds fantastic. Thank you for sharing that in a little bit more detail. But I love that you've got the A to Z prompts
Mm,
and questions and things that really can launch the whole journaling journey for the
exactly.
listeners, right?
Mhm.
So that's excellent. And I will absolutely include all the details in the show notes as well. So, was it surprising to you, the writing process for either book? Was it something that you really thought you were going to do? Or was it just like you spark and you're like, I have to write a book about this?
For my first book, it was, more gradual. I started writing it in 2017, I believe. First started writing down the different ideas, and the idea for working from home or writing a book about that came from my own experiences of working from home and what I wanted to share with others who were considering working from home or those who had to transition to working from home. So that was the inspiration for starting to write that book and then publishing it. And as I was writing the Home at the Office book, part of it, or in one of the chapters, I include a little bit about journaling and the types of journals that readers could keep. And it was from that I decided to expand on that and write a book specifically on journaling. So that was the inspiration for The Gift of Journaling. And I learned a lot about the publishing process, the writing, both the writing and publishing process for both books. And that's something that I've really enjoyed and have really enjoyed learning about and just improving upon my knowledge in the writing and publishing area.
Oh, great. Thank you for sharing that with us. And I always love to hear kind of what it is that gets us excited and gets us going and launches us in a new direction. And writing that first book, it sounds like during the process, you were like, hey, this is a really great idea right here. Let me
Hmm.
spin this off and create a whole new work around it. And so that's excellent. Congratulations again on both of those. And
Thank you.
thank you for sharing it with us. So, is there anything that you think that you'd love for the listeners to know that we haven't shared so far that is important around journaling or whatever you think might be good for them to know?
Yeah. Another thing that I'd like to add and share with listeners is that when they journal, if sometimes what might happen is that they have a question, but they don't have an answer to it. And I just recommend that if you do have questions for for the direction of your business, for example, or other area in your life, just write it down in your journal. And then if you don't have the answer that time, that's okay. The answer might come in a few weeks, and then you can come back to that question and answer it. So that's also the neat thing about journaling and keeping a journal is that it can be a place where we can write down questions that we have, but we don't have the answers to them yet. And in that way, our journals do help us to learn more about ourselves. And that includes our skills and gifts and abilities. And that can also, I know we've talked a lot about today about business development and career development. Career development could also include maybe transitioning careers. And so that could be something that by asking those questions or by reflecting on different points in one's journal might result in exploring more about what does a career transition look like, for example, and how does that help me in my career development. So the really great thing about journaling is that it is flexible and personal and something that one can tailor to where one's at. And it can be portable as well, which is what I also love too. So it can be, one can have, choose to have a smaller size journal, and that way it can easily fit into a pocket, either pants pocket or pocket of a backpack or bag, and one can take it wherever one's going and even just journal like 5 minutes on a lunch break. Or if one's commuting to work, for example, then again, just to quickly take out in 5 minutes to journal and then put it back in. And so that's something that's really great about journaling, that it's portable and it's personal and personable to each journaler.
Yeah, that's great points in there again. Thank you for sharing those with us. And I
You're
thought
welcome.
of the idea of like just a little tiny, because they've got these little
Yeah,
journals, right? That little tiny ones
exactly.
that you
Yeah.
can just put about anywhere because it's so tiny. But when an idea comes up, it's great to have that handy, right? You could jot it
Hmm.
down so you don't lose it if you're in the middle of something else. And so that's a fantastic suggestion. Thank you for that. And something else that came up during what you were sharing for me is the idea of exploring if you're looking at career transition or change or whatever,
Hmm.
and beginning to explore what matters to me, what do I want to do in terms of XYZ, or do I
Hmm.
want to work a full-time job? Do I not want to work a full-time job? And beginning to ask yourself these questions that could lead to some
That's right.
new,
Hmm.
career. And so I love that as a suggestion for using while you're journaling. So good stuff. Thank you.
You're
Well, I
welcome.
always love to ask my guests if there are other books or podcasts that they think the listeners should check out. Is there any that you'd like to suggest today?
Yeah, definitely. One that I like to recommend, a couple of them. The first one is Creative Journal Writing by Stephanie Dowrick. And the other one, it's called The Bullet Journal Method. So those ones are both excellent ones. Creative Journal Writing, I find that one provides a lot of good prompts, which can be helpful for others to journal along their and enrich their journaling journey. They can have some new topics to consider. And the bullet journal method is more about a way to journal. And that was more, as I was mentioning earlier today, about just making lists or writing down in point form. That's something similar. And it's just a different approach to writing and keeping a journal.
Yeah. Okay. Great suggestions. I'll include that information in the show notes. And how about podcasts? Do you enjoy listening to podcasts?
I do as well. Yes. Yeah. I've been listening to some really good podcasts. I usually, yeah, I like to listen to podcasts when I'm traveling or like in the road. Driving, there we go, driving. Well, and listening to a podcast. It just makes the time go by really quick. That's been awesome. And I've been listening to podcasts by Jordan Peterson and from Hillsdale College. And so that there's such a variety of topics on both of those podcasts, from art to homemaking to career. So just a variety of topics that would be, yeah, I'm sure many listeners would find something there that would be of interest to them for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for sharing those. They sound fascinating, and I will be sure to include the information. Again, Barbary, this has been so great, and all of the information that you've shared has just been fantastic. Lastly, before we close out, how would the listeners be able to find you if they have questions? They want to pick your brain a little bit. I know you have a website, so if you'd like to
Hmm.
share that again, or if you're on different social media, if you want to share those.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I do have a website. My website address is www.barborigarnet.com. And on there, on my website, I have more information on journaling resources, as well as a link to book a journaling consultation if there are listeners who are wanting to get started with journaling or just are needing some suggestions or just have questions about journaling, whatever stage, and whether they're new or have been journaling for a long time. That's always available there too to book a time there. And then on social media, I'm on Instagram and Facebook as well.
Okay, great. I'll be sure to include the links to all the places so the listeners can find you easily. And again, Barbara, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing this information with us. It's been wonderful. I so appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Really enjoy being here. And thank you so much for the great questions. And just been a pleasure to be here today. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thanks again. We'll talk more soon.
That was great. Thank you.
Thank you, dear listeners, for tuning in to another insightful episode of the Pockets of Knowledge podcast. We appreciate your time and curiosity as we explore fascinating topics together. If you enjoyed today's discussion, be sure to join us next week for another amazing episode. Remember, your journey of learning and growth is a continuous adventure, and we're thrilled to be part of it. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Until next week, stay curious and keep exploring those pockets of knowledge.